إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم هن لباس لكم وأنتم لباس لهن وقال عليه الصلاة والسلام إذا أراد الله عز وجل بأهل بيت خيرا أدخل عليهم الرفق. Dear brothers and sisters, we begin by praising Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We send peace and blessings upon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon his companions, upon all those who have treaded in their footsteps of righteousness and piety. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He make us from those who love Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions and who adopt their lifestyle and their teachings. Ameen. A happy marriage is something which everyone desires or wishes for, right? Whether the person be married or not, right? You ask a person who's not married, they're getting to that age where now it's time for them to go out and start looking for a potential spouse. You ask them, what's the biggest thing that's keeping you awake? What's the biggest thing that's bothering you? And they'll tell you, I need to find a good partner in life. I need to find a good spouse, right? Why? Because we want to have a good marriage. You ask the person who's married, what keeps you up at night? What's the biggest thing you're worried about? Or what's one of your greatest wishes? And the married person will tell you, well, one of my greatest wishes or one of my biggest desires is to have a long-lasting, happy marriage, right? So whether the person be married or not, this is a wish which both people or both types of people have and desire for, to eventually at one point in their lives where they can be happy with their partners and live together. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a hadith, he mentions that, and this hadith is narrated by Aisha radhiyallahu anha. She mentions, إِذَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَ, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends بِأَهْلِ بَيْتٍ خَيْرًا, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends for a household goodness, right? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to have mercy and bless a household, a family with goodness, then what happens? The hadith says, أَدَخَلَ عَلَيْهِمْ الرِّفْقِ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them and blesses them with mercy, tenderness, gentleness, and love for one another. Right? This is the key ingredient that is required in order to have not only a happy marriage, but also a happy family. Last week we spoke about safeguarding our homes. We spoke about the importance of creating that environment in our homes where we can seek refuge. Because at the end of the day, our home is a place of tranquility. It's meant to be a place where a place of comfort. Our home is not meant to be a place where we feel stressed out and tense. The home is supposed to be a place of comfort. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls it sakan, the place of comfort, the place of tranquility. Right? When we go into our homes and we see our families and we spend time with our families, it's supposed to be a time, it's supposed to be a place where we are now in a relaxed, comfortable situation and state of mind. It's not supposed to be a place where we go into and we're stressed out, right? And we spoke about the key things that are required in order to create that sort of environment in our households, that we have to be very, very careful about whom we let in and what we let in, right? The things that we watch on TV, the things that we allow our children to view and read on the internet. All these things have an effect and influence on in our homes. And last week we also, our family night was about the advice of the Quran and Hadith and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam pertaining to husband and wife. We've received a number of requests from brothers and sisters to actually reiterate and summarize the points that we went over in our family night because they found it very beneficial. So inshallah today, that's what we will do. We will go over the key points that we covered, the key advices which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us, and the key advice which the Quran and the Sunnah give us as far as husband and wife is concerned. As we mentioned the hadith of Rasulullah ﷺ, that when Allah wants or intends good for a family, for a household, then Allah creates love, affection, tenderness and gentleness between the family members. And this is really the key ingredient, right? Where you are able to cooperate with your family members, right? It's not always about myself. A family cannot function correctly, and a family cannot live with one another if each member of the family is just focused on themselves. Imagine if the father of the family or the mother of the family, all they think about is myself, right? Well, I'm not getting enough rest. Where's my food? Where's this? Where's that? Everything revolves around that person. Imagine how uncomfortable and stressful the environment would be in a family where the father walks in and the only thing he's worried about is what's happening with me. Where's my things? How come everything's not according to how I want it? Imagine how the wife will feel. Imagine how the children will feel. Right? There will be a sense of discomfort and stress in that atmosphere. Now imagine if each and every single family member is like that. Imagine if the husband comes home or the wife comes home and instead of cooperation, affection with one another, each person is just worried and focused about themselves. It's disastrous. It's what they call a dysfunctional family, where it's individuals living in the same household, but they have their own lives. No one really cares about one another. It's like your roommate. You go to boarding school, or maybe you go on a vacation and you're rooming with someone. You're not really worried about what that person is doing, what that person is eating, when that person goes to sleep, or it's just temporary. We just share a house. We just share a space. The family is exactly opposite. The family functions as a whole. The family functions together. If one member of the family is in some sort of grief or stress, then the rest of the family also feels the same way. And that's why the hadith of Rasulullah ﷺ, he mentions that al-ummah kal-jasad al-wahid, that the ummah, the nation, the Muslim population is like one body. That if one part of the body is in pain, then the rest of the body feels it. Likewise, our entire Muslim population is a large family. If one part of our nation is suffering, if one group of Muslims are suffering, then the entire Muslim population, all the Muslims feel it, because at the end of the day, we're all brothers and sisters. At the end of the day, we're all one big family. But now imagine that being in your household, where one person is going through a difficult time, right? And if it's a healthy family, if it's a family that actually interacts with one another, if it's a family that has communication with one another and concern and care for one another, then obviously all the other family members are going to be in some sort of stress. And as parents, we can relate, not only as parents but also as kids. As parents, if the children are going through a difficult time, then the parents get stressed out. And on the other hand, if the parents are going through a difficult time, right, whether the parents are fighting, whether the parents are sick, or whatever the case, then the kids feel it as well, and they go through a difficult, stressful time, right? So the key ingredient that is required in order to create this happy household, this happy marriage that everyone is looking for, is rifq. Because as the hadith mentions, it's what is required if you want something good for your family. Rifq, which is, again, gentleness, affection, compassion. This is what is required. And as each and every single member of our families, we have to take it as our personal responsibility to make sure that we are delivering this compassion, this affection, and this understanding to our spouse, right? There's a researcher who's been researching on families and the evolution of the family for over many decades. I can't recall her name, but she mentions that back in the day, a marriage functioned very differently from the way marriages function today. Back in, I'm talking back in the day, meaning like centuries ago, hundreds of years ago, right? Hundreds of years ago, it wasn't just, you were married and you had your own family and that was it. It was you were part of a town. You were part of a community. Before we got all this technology, it's a paradox that we have all these different forms of communication. We have a cell phone, we have social media, we have email, text message, so many different forms of communication. Yet, we are now so separated from one another. More than ever before, we are completely separated from one another, right? You would imagine if you have so many different forms of communication, then you would be interacting more and spending more time with one another. It's the exact opposite. Now it's, why should I visit that person? Let me just send him a text message, right? A person's sick, oh, get well soon. I'm done for the day, right? That's it. So this person, this expert in family relations, she mentions that decades ago, hundreds of years ago, the family life was very different. Families back then was not just husband and wife. It was you were part of a larger community. You were part of your town, where everyone, each member of the town played a significant role in your family as well, right? So what she goes on to explain is that back then, people would not rely so heavily on one person. In today's time, our spouse, whether it be our husband or whether it be our wife, right? Depending on whether you're male or female, not that men have husbands, right? If you're a wife and your husband, or husband and wife, right? We rely so heavily on our spouse that our spouse is supposed to be our caretaker, is supposed to be our best friend, is supposed to be everything wrapped up in one. She says, whereas in reality, back then, it wasn't like that. Back then, there was open communication and there was a community. And you were not relying on one person for all this emotion, right? You had friends that you went out to and you had a good time with. And then you had your wife or your husband, right, that you spent time with. You had your kids, you had your parents, whatever the case, right? But the point that we're making over here is that the dynamics of family have changed dramatically, right? And as individuals, as Muslims, right, we have to understand that if we don't take control of what's happening in our families, it's not going to fix itself. Many of us work very, very hard outside of our homes so that we can provide a good life for our families. But if we're not working just as hard on our families, they say you have to work. They say you have to work on your business, not just in your business. Meaning you have to plan your business, you have to have a vision for your business in order to really grow. Likewise, if you're just working for your family, but not on your family, if you're not spending time with the family, if you're not, constantly seeing what's the issues that are happening in your family and how you can solve them, it's not just going to happen by itself. It's not going to fix itself, right? Whether it be our partners, our spouses, or our kids. The quickest solution, or the quickest false solution that many of us have is, if I'm having a problem with my wife or if I'm having a problem with my children, I'm just going to send them to the masjid and they're going to be fine, right? After 15, 20 years, I'm just sending them to the masjid and the imam will take care of it. It doesn't happen like that, right? We have to work on our families. We have to be involved in our families, right? And for many of us, it's difficult. We understand. Many of the brothers and the sisters over here, they're working very long hours, and it's very difficult. But as difficult as it may be, we have to understand that we have to give time to our families. We have to understand our families. We have to have this rifq in our families. And it starts with us. We have to show this affection, this compassion, this understanding, right? A few of the other advices that we'll give over here, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam being described of how he lived this life inside his home. Some of the companions would ask Aisha radiallahu anha, the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they would ask Aisha radiallahu anha that, how was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his home? What would he do at home? Was he just someone that would go home, read Quran all day, or be busy in the dhikr and the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and just pray all day? What kind of man was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at home? Right? So then Aisha radiallahu anha, she mentions that كان يخيط ثوبه ويخسف نعله ويعمل ما يعمل الرجال في بيوتهم. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would stitch his own clothes, he would fix his own sandals, and he would do what normal people do in their homes, right? What Aisha radiallahu anha, she's saying is that, and then she adds on to this, she says, مَا كَانَ إِلَّا بَشَرًا مِنَ الْبَشَرِ, that the Prophet was a man just like every other man, right? That he would do these normal household chores, right? He would spend time with his family. And this is what's important for us to understand, that understanding our family, spending time with our family is also an obligation, right? We have an obligation to provide for our family financially, but more importantly, we have an obligation to spend time with them and fulfill their needs emotionally. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you hear the hadith, Aisha radiallahu anha, she's saying that the Prophet would take care of his own chores, he would help around the house, and he would do what normal people do. He would do what other men do at home, right? They would spend time with their families. So the point is that no matter how difficult it may be outside, no matter how long our hours may be, we have to take conscious decisions to spend time with our families, right? Spend time with our families, because at the end of the day, you read about these people that, these very, very successful people at the end of their lives, right? Like Steve Jobs. We all consider Steve Jobs to be successful in this world. But you read about the last things he said before he passed away. He didn't say, I wish I spent more time in my office, or I wish I spent more time designing another phone. He said, I wish I spent more time with the people I love. Right? At the end of the day, that's what matters. That if we're working so hard, if we're not giving any time to our families, when the time comes for us to leave, we're not going to say, I wish I worked a little harder. We're all going to say, I wish I spent a little bit more time with my kids. I wish I spent a little bit more time with the people I love. Right? And these are the memories we're going to leave back. We don't want to leave back memories of where our kids or our family just knows us to be someone that works very, very hard. Right? That's something good. But we want them to remember us as people that actually cared about us. They gave us their time. They made time for us, right? And this is what's important to understand. So Aisha radiallahu anha, she mentions that when Allah wants goodness for a household, for a family, then Allah blesses them with goodness. Allah blesses them with affection and love for one another, understanding for one another. So now let's get into what this affection and love for one another means, right? Rifq. Rifq, as described, right? And there's another hadith over here. It says, Inna Allah rafiq yuhibbur rifq. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is rafiq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is compassionate. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is loving. And He loves compassion and love, right? And then the hadith goes on to say, وَيُعْطِي عَلَى رِفْقٍ مَا لَا يُعْطَى عَلَى الْأَنَفِ. That what you get from love and compassion is something which you can never derive from. Anaf is ruggedness, right? What the hadith is saying and explaining is that when you treat people with compassion, with affection, you are able to get them to do things which you cannot get them to do by force, right? You can force a person to do something. If you have children, you can force them to do something, right? And they'll do it in front of you. But as soon as you turn away, it's going to be very different. Likewise, with your spouse, whether it be your husband and wife or a wife, you can force them to do something. But it's not going to be the same if you can win them over by showing them love or compassion. If you can show them affection, explain to them, take the time to explain to them compassionately, they will change, right, permanently, as opposed to just yelling, screaming, threatening whatever it may be for a temporary change. So the hadith is saying that you can get more from a person by showing them compassion, affection, and love than being harsh and rude with people. And this goes especially towards our family, right? So this is the key ingredient, rifq, which is compassion, love, affection. Now, what does this all mean? It means clear communication, understanding one another, right? Taking the time to understand one another. And these are general things, right? You pick up any book on marriage, right? They'll mention stuff like this, right? And there's hadith, many hadith explaining these kind of things, right? And we'll go over a few. One hadith over here that we want to mention over here is that Rasulullah ﷺ says that the most disgraceful person on the Day of Judgment is a person who shares his family secrets with others, right? This is a responsibility that when you have a family, right, there are going to be things in our families that aren't always great. Each family has their problem, right? Has their problems. Each couple, each family, no family is perfect, right? There's no family without their own set of problems, right? So Rasulullah ﷺ is saying the most disgraceful person or the most disliked person on the Day of Judgment is the person who goes and shares their issues about their families or shares the secrets of their families with other people, right? Private matters are meant to be kept private. In today's time, with so much social media, where where the norm, where society says you should make everything public, right? Everyone loves to publicize everything. Issues that were at one time just family issues and kept to themselves. Now they're on Facebook. You go on Facebook and one person saying just got done arguing with my husband, stuff like that you don't share. But people nowadays, we can't differentiate between right and wrong. It's becoming normal where you share everything without even thinking, right? So the hadith of Rasulullah ﷺ, this is a key advice for all family members, right? Not just for husband and wife, but also children, that keep family affairs within the family. There's no need to go and tell it to your friends. There's no need to go and share everything. Certain issues with our family, certain aspects of our family are meant to be kept private. They're meant to just stay within. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describing husband and wife, He says, "Hunna libasul lakum wa antum libasul lahun." That they are a garment for you and you are a garment for them. The scholars of tafsir, they mention that what this ayah is explaining is that the husband covers the faults of the wife and the wife covers the faults of the husband. And they protect one another. Just like how our clothes, when we put on clothes, they beautify us. When we put on clothes, they make us look good. When we put on clothes, it covers up our blemishes, our faults, right? It makes us modest. Likewise, our clothes, likewise our spouses are meant to do the same thing. They're there to make us our better half, right? As we say, our better half. They're there to complement us, to make us better, to cover our faults, to cover our blemishes. This is our responsibility. And now, we're talking about different things. We're giving out different hadith and different advice. The biggest thing to keep in mind, and this is probably the hardest, right, is after we hear, these 4 or 5 lessons, or after this khutbah ends, whatnot, we have to ask ourselves, how much compassion, how much affection, how much understanding and love am I showing to my spouse, right? Not the other way around. That, I heard this today, but you're not doing it, right? We have to turn that focus around and focus it on ourselves. We have to stop focusing on what our family is not doing and start focusing on ourselves. You read books on marriage advice. There's a very good book called The 5 Languages of Love, right? And what that book explains is that different people have different ways of communicating their love, right? Or their affection for people. Whether it be through words of affection, whether it be through, spending time, whether it be through gifts, whatever it may be, right? There's 5 different ways. And one of the key things he writes in there is, whenever he says that he dealt with thousands of divorce cases, right? Thousands of couples that were on the brink of divorce. And by applying the method that he taught them, they were able to transform their marriage. From going from the brink of divorce to becoming the happiest couple ever, right? And he says that the key thing over here is, whenever a couple comes to me, I tell them, don't worry about what the other person isn't doing or what the other person is doing. Focus on what you need to do, right? So there was this one lady who came to him, and we'll finish off with this. This lady came to him and she said, my husband, he just comes back from work, he just eats, sleeps, and just works on his car, right? He loves fixing cars. And that's all he does. He never speaks to me, he never does anything, right? He doesn't smile at me, he never says my food is good, right? So she says, we've been married for 13 years, and I'm thinking of divorcing right now. So he says that, okay, you need to do X, Y, and Z. So she says, why am I supposed to do it? Can't I bring him here and then you can tell him what to do? So he tells her that no, you need to do X, Y, and Z. Just do it for the next 3 weeks and tell me what happens. So she goes back, right, and she starts doing what he asked her to do. She starts doing exactly what he asked her to do. And these are not like, secret things. What he asked her to do was just be better to him, right? Show him more affection, show him more care and more love, right? And then she comes back after 3 weeks. She's like, I don't know what it is, but my husband is very different now. He smiles at me. He spends time with me, right? The point that we're making over here is, we can give all the advice of the Quran and the Hadith. We can read whatever we want to read. But until we don't take responsibility and say, we're going to turn this marriage around, or we're going to fix this family, it's not going to fix by itself. If we're going to point the finger that you're not doing this, and because of you our family is broken, or because of that the family is broken, the family will never get together. Once we as an individual, myself, once I take responsibility that yes, my family or my married life is not in the best situation, what can I do? Once a person takes responsibility, that's when change will come. So as we're hearing the advices from the Quran, from the Hadith, that Rasulullah ﷺ is saying that for a happy family you have to have compassion, love, and affection. We're not going to go back today and say, you don't have enough compassion, you don't have enough affection or love. We have to ask ourselves, we have to sit down and think, how much affection, how much compassion and love am I showing to my family? Right? Once we take responsibility, that's when change will come, inshallah. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us with good families, inshallah. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين وجعلنا للمتقين إماما. بارك الله لنا ولكم في القرآن المجيد ونفعنا وإياكم الآيات وذكر الحكيم. استغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله وكفى بالله شهيدا ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وصل على المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات. Dear brothers and sisters, we'd like to conclude today's khutbah with an ayah from the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَبَعَثُوا حَكَمًا مِّنْ أَهْلِهِ وَحَكَمًا مِّنْ أَهْلِهَا إِن يُرِيدَ إِصْلَاحًا يُوَفِّقِ اللَّهُ بَيْنَهُمَا. This ayah from Surah An-Nisa is in regards to when there's arguments and disagreements amongst husband and wife. Right? Now the reason why Allah addresses this is because it's going to happen. Right? At one point or another, husband and wife will get into some sort of disagreement. At one point or another, they will argue about something. And most of the time, it's not a big deal. But at times, right, if you're living with a person for 20 years, right, you can't expect that you're going to agree on every single thing. At times, what happens is these arguments or these disagreements escalate into issues or aspects where it completely destroys the marriage. Where both person is now thinking, should we separate? Should we call off the marriage? Right? Should we go our own ways? So disagreements, arguments will happen, right? If someone ever says that a happy marriage is a marriage without disagreements or arguments, that's false, right? A marriage is supposed to have arguments and disagreements. It's supposed to, right? Why? Because if you live with someone else, you're going to have disagreements. We have disagreements with ourselves, right? We can't sometimes make up our own mind. Sometimes we want to do this and sometimes we want to do that. Now imagine with another person, right? So arguments and disagreements will happen. Now, when these arguments and disagreements escalate to a level where you need to bring in a third party, where you need to bring in a mediator or an arbitrator to help you solve this issue, right? This is the advice the Quran is giving. And this is probably one of the most crucial pieces of advice that we can keep in mind, because not understanding this correctly actually destroys families and marriages. Oftentimes we see that, a husband and wife, they're going through a difficult time and they want to resolve the issue. They want to fix it. They want to find a solution. And they call different people. They call people from their family, they call their friends. And then instead of patching up and solving the problem, what ends up happening is they end up getting divorced. Or the problem escalates, right? And it completely destroys everything. Now the Quran is not telling us that you shouldn't get your family involved. What the Quran is saying, فَبَعَثُوا حَكَمًا مِّنْ أَهْلِهِ, that search for someone who has experience. Right? It's not saying just call any random person from your family. Oftentimes, with the family members that we bring, they're not able to make the correct judgments. Why? Because they're so biased. Right? If we end up calling our parents at times, it may cause the situation to get worse. Why? Because now that certain family member can't see past our love, their love for us. Right? They think we're right. They're not going to listen to the other person. Right? So the Quran is saying, فَبَعَثُوا حَكَمًا, right? Search for a judgment. In other words, what the Quran is saying, search for someone that's going to be fair. Right? Don't just get anyone from your family. It's very important to understand that. It's not saying your parents are bad. It's not saying your brother is bad. What the Quran is saying is get someone who will be fair. Get someone who will be just. Get someone that will be able to see past your relationship with them, right? You don't want to get someone involved that's just going to say, oh, no matter what you say, you are right, right? We have family members that love us so much that they'll never accept anything bad from us, right? So the ayah in the Quran is telling us, when these situations do arise, when these problems do occur, and we need to bring in a third party, we need to bring in our family to help us mediate and solve this problem. Be wise in your judgment. Be wise in who you pick, right? You don't want to bring in people that are going to destroy this issue, that'll end up destroying the family. We need to bring in people and involve people that will help us mediate with objective judgments and understanding, right? Not that you're my family member, so I'm going to take your side. It's it has to be objective. No taking sides at this point, right? So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to take the advice of the Quran and the Sunnah to heart, and may Allah bless us with happy families and protect our families. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, as He mentions, make our families the coolness of our eyes. رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون فاذكروا الله يذكركم واشكروه ولا تكفرون